I do. There we go. Introduction. Elizabeth has done a really good job at integrating and using our VA. I've had VAs for a long time. These are virtual assistants, usually people overseas or outside of the country that are helping with some admin stuff. It's not a requirement that they're outside of the country, but it's just often the case. And Elizabeth has done a fantastic job at using one of the ones we have better than I've ever had a VA used. I had one that I still love, have a soft spot for, but I was the one leading him, and I was not leading him as well as Elizabeth has been leading the VA that really runs a lot of the piping of our business, a lot of the ongoing things, a lot of the tasks that need to be done. It may appear as though Elizabeth or I do it, but a lot of the time it's her. So it's all thanks to Elizabeth having things set up really well, being really intentional about creating processes and explaining them and structuring them well. So Elizabeth's going to present on using VAs, and I'm a testimonial to her skill set here because she has helped us use Nivy, who's the VA I'm referring to, so well by just being so good at keeping her organized and giving her really, really clear instructions on some of these ongoing tasks. So without further ado, there we go.
There we go. A little bit of context. I actually was talking to my sister the other day. We were talking about VAs and outsourcing work, and I was telling her that I really enjoy the process and am good at it for a few reasons. One, I feel very strongly about, well, first of all, a lot of like repetitive tasks can be really difficult for me, which I think is pretty common with entrepreneurs. The second is I want things to go well for our clients. I want things to go well for us. And so I think it's like extra motivation. I also want to make sure that I'm empowering the people that are working with us to do a really good job. And so I think like knowing all of y'all as well as I do know most of y'all, I know that that is probably like very true of the way that you operate too. Anyone that you work with that's either representing you or a part of your organization, you want to treat them really well, but you also want to make sure that they are set up for success. And so I think that is something that was a concept that I don't think I really understood as much when I've used VAs in the past as I did kind of this go around. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is kind of like those things that I even learned through like other experiences that weren't as positive. So I'm going to start. I have a slideshow because I always have to have something that keeps me a little bit on task. Okay. So we're going to go through 5 steps to a successful VA relationship and kind of lessons that I've learned along the way and that Brad and I have. So the first is really kind of identifying those tasks. The second is trying to
you, Elizabeth. You don't have to throw me in. You got it.
Well, Brad does a very good job in the hiring process. So we can talk about tools and tips and tricks to use there, especially. When to hire, really identifying. And I think when to hire is kind of something that is it can be very objective. We sometimes think that, but I also think it's subjective, and it really is kind of like there are more things to it than just like financially or whatever. The next is how to prepare and set them up for success, then where to start looking, and then evaluating to make sure that it is, a long-term successful relationship. So the first, and I think a really important part, and actually a quick overview. So Brad kind of covered this, but a VA is, basically an assistant that's managing your tasks that's out of the office. You can absolutely use US based. They say this is, in general statistics, it's typically, obviously in the US, it's going to be higher. I think the average that I found is $27 an hour. And then internationally based starts at $3 an hour. Typically that's going with kind of the Philippines, which is traditionally where a lot of VA agencies are based out of. I think a lot of times we kind of think of a VA as an automatic full-time team member that we're adding, but that's not necessarily true. They can definitely start part-time if you feel like you don't necessarily have a full-time job, but there are things you have to take off your plate. You can definitely start part-time. So I think one of the, these are a little wonky, but one of the most important parts is really kind of identifying what you want to take off your plate. So some of this I actually took from the automations training that I did earlier this year, because I think there are a lot of things that kind of line up, because the first step is definitely to brain dump all the activities needed to run your business. And then I think the next part of the brain dump that's really important that kind of gets left off is, what are the things that you don't necessarily have to do or need to do, or but you have been wanting to do for a long time. I think getting consistent in social media might be one of those things. Sending thank you gifts to your clients. There are a lot of things that we kind of have on the back burner, or kind of the wish list. Like, if my business was exactly the way that I wanted it to be, and I, did all these things, what are some additional touch points that I would want to add in that I just don't have the bandwidth to do right now? So I think first step is really brain dumping that. And it may take a week to do that, because it may take a little bit of time as you're going through your daily activities, and really being intentional about thinking that through before you even start talking to a VA, before you start looking for a VA agency, but really being just very intentional about, a comprehensive brain dump. One thing that Brad and I can even help with too, we have one that we've done with the client before. We also, you can run those by us and ask for, our inputs too, for things that we've seen that might just be, a blind spot for you. But I think getting this as comprehensive as possible so you can start working from there. The second, I think, is really important, and this was part of the automations too, is identifying all the things that really drain your energy or just out of your skill set. I was talking to a client today, and we were talking about the Alex Hormozy, one of Brad's favorite quotes that I actually use kind of a lot in lots of different circumstances in life, is his, did you expect it to be hard? This is what hard feels like. That's running a small business. A lot of times there are things that we have to do in the beginning that just, suck a little bit, and they're a bit of drains on us, but we know that there is an end in sight. And so I think if you can identify those, and one of the things that I think that I struggle with is, there are some things that are kind of a drain to me that I think nobody else can do. And Brad is always like, somebody else can do this. You're not the only one. And in a nice way, not in a, but I think really being intentional about what are the things that when I have to do them, I know I'm not the best person to do them because of performance and because of the life that they suck out of me. So I think identifying those in that list. I do think at this point you can go back to that automations training that I did in January, because there are some things that you probably will be able to look at. Did you just change to Proline, and now there are automations available to you that weren't there before? Can you, are there things that can be automated? And obviously that's a great option, because typically, but not always, those things are free, and they're just gonna go. The next, I think, is really important when you're looking at who to delegate to.
Beth, really quick, can you minimize since you have the weird settings, can you make it so only you are able to see on your gallery bar? There we go.
Sorry. Were there was it double everybody or just double me?
Well, everyone could see yours, and it was just covering all the
Got it.
slides.
So then the next is looking through those tasks. So you've eliminated the automations and you've identified the things that really drain your energy or out of your skill set. And then it's important to next mark those tasks as kind of things that can be standardized and those things that need either critical thinking or something that, a skill that needs a bit more either specialty to, exactly what you do and exactly who you serve, or something that is going to need a lot of critical thinking skills. So sometimes when using assistants, I've found in the past, especially there are times where it takes kind of that like full rounded knowledge to make decisions in those tasks. And so I think a lot of times those are the things that are important to either keep on your plate for a little bit or make sure that you find like the exact right fit for those. But the standardized ones are the ones that you can start, really thinking of a plan to take those off your plate. So again, some of the critical thinking ones might be able to be broken down into either, an even more detailed SOP that has some variables in it, or something that, you might want to keep for a little bit longer on your plate. And again, I think it is very, very, very hard to like overemphasize how important it is to do something, either this or something like this, before you make that first hire. Because I, in the past, have had VAs where, as a growing business, as a busy, business owner, as a mom, I'm like, oh yeah, VA sounds nice. Like that sounds really great. And it is, and it can be, but the reality is if you don't have a plan and it's not a role that just comes in and you're like, let's play this by ear. It's something that at the end of the day, you want to make sure that when you're investing in this role, that there's a lot of clarity, and that the way that we feel before we get a VA often is like overwhelmed and frustrated and feeling like we're not doing our best. And if we skip steps like this, we're not going to be any farther along, because we are going to be paying somebody. They're not going to know exactly what's going on. There's not going to be clarity. I always say, like, the most fun hires in our business are the people that every time we pay them, like, we're like so excited to send that money to them, because we're so thankful for the quality, like the improvement in the quality of life, the way that we're able to serve our clients better, and the way we're able to make things run better. And I think, again, if we're skipping steps like this, we aren't going to have that relief. It's just going to add to more frustration, because you are going to be limited in bandwidth. You're going to be managing someone who doesn't know exactly what they're supposed to do, and you're really getting more things added to your plate. Often hires do bring things, more things on our plate in the beginning, because we are training them, or we're, getting them ready. But the end goal is obviously to then take those things off our plate. And it's really hard to do that if we're not ready. So I say soul sucking a lot, or sucking the lift or life out of you. So again, I think that when to hire feels like it should be very objective. Like when you have this much revenue, or you have this, specific thing outside of that task that I've been very specific about doing before. I think that there is some subjectiveness here. I think, when you are seeing that the activities that you have to do on a daily basis are really just sucking the lift out of you, that is a good indication. When you aren't able to focus on the income generating activities that are going to move your business forward, when you're really in the, kind of just constantly in the day-to-day struggle, it's a good indication that, taking those things off your plate, it's going to be a good thing. One of the things I really enjoyed about last week was, if you've not watched that, it was a good training, and he put up an illustration, the kind of the breakdown of, what things cost you, kind of looking at your time as an owner, or even your sales, looking at the things that you are doing right now and how much it's costing you. If you're able to, pay somebody a lot less to do those things, and then even in the inverse, you're able to spend a lot more time on things that are going to make you money. Obviously, that's really fun to see too. Another step before that you hire is really understanding the process that you are taking off your plate. Obviously, making the list before, but in the fall, we were doing things a little bit different than we had. And so there were a lot of things that I was doing that were very repetitive, and they were things that were taking a long time, and, learning and just kind of, it was one of those like walking in mud a little bit times for me. But the reality was I needed to know exactly the way that it looked before I was ever going to be able to put that, to give that to somebody else. And so as, much of like a slog, is that a word? It feels like it's important that you or somebody on your team really understands the process. It's kind of like with what we do. When I'm talking to clients, I always say it's really important for you to understand, the steps at every appointment, the steps at every job. It's good for you to be taking those steps, not only to be a good leader, to be a good example, but to understand, the details, so that when your team, is looking for guidance, obviously we're here, but the reality is, being a leader, it really is about understanding, how things need to go before you can pass them on. And again, the last, you've identified how much work, kind of, what exactly you're looking for. And then again, doing the first step that I mentioned. So, again, I think this is something that can feel like it needs to be very objective and math based. And I think that obviously you want to protect your margins. But I also think this is an area where, one of a friend of Brad and I has posted today kind of about how a lot of times we are raised, to have this like very specific idea of what success looks like. And, then we get it in our head what that looks like financially and what that looks like. And when I was leaving my last job where I worked for someone to start my first business, my boss, who was a mentor, one of the last things that she said to me before I left was, it's really important for you to decide what success looks like to you. And I think that was one of the most impactful things that anyone has ever told me. And she said, she's like, I'm not talking about a number, and I'm not talking about a revenue, but I'm really talking about like in your day-to-day life, what does success look like for you? And at the time, my boys were 4 and 7. And success to me looked like having the flexibility to take them to school and to go on field trips, and, to have the bandwidth to, help them with their homework when they needed it, to be able to stay home. And so my definition of success looks very, very different than yours does. And so I think that that is something to keep in mind when you're thinking through when to hire, because again, you may have the bandwidth or the desire to work more to keep more money in your pocket, or you may, kind of have a set number that your family depends on, and then you're able to outsource other things that will free up your time. And so I do think, again, there's a lot of fluidity in this when to hire that is really kind of dependent on the lifestyle that you want to lead and the business that you want to have. So how to prepare, obviously I've gone over that a little bit, but, take that list and then look at the things that at the end, the ones that you are wanting to outsource, start creating SOPs for each task that you plan on passing on to the VA. I know Kofi had mentioned one that he was looking at, and there's, I'll post in the resources. There's a program that it's basically a Chrome extension that you can put on your computer, and you can go through whatever the task is. You literally just do the task, and then it creates an SOP for you. But I'm going to show an SOP that we do for our, so obviously with SOPs, you want to get very detailed in the steps, kind of exactly what, everything that's involved. I think sometimes we take those like micro steps for granted, but because this is something that you want to basically write it for, I don't know the level, but let's say a kindergartner that can read. So we will share these templates too, because we got this from a program that we did. And I think I really like the way that they're laid out because I think it's very comprehensive. What I love about this too is it really does, because it's so comprehensive, it frees up your time a lot, because you really cover the bases. So in every SOP that we create, we do a video explanation. So we do a Vimeo walk screen share or a Loom screen share. And so literally we walk through every single step and we tell them exactly what we're doing when it's essentially this how right here. So that they're able to see it. It kind of touches bases on, how does somebody, if somebody learns and they're very, kind of, they want to read through it, they've got this, but then they're also able to go back to that video and rewatch and really, go through the steps as many times as needed. It's been incredibly helpful for us as we've passed these tasks on. It's been really fun to see how well it's gone. So we start with the video explanation and then we do the why. So we really talk about like, hey, this is why you're doing this. So we create, if you're in the Built Right Fast Forward, you get these branded training portals. We talk about what, kind of the different pieces, what the step is, this is super important. And I think the why especially is important because you want to get buy-in. You want to make sure they understand exactly why they are doing this. I am a bit of an anarchist. And so if somebody tells me to do something, typically, if not verbally, at least in my mind, I'm like, why do I need to do this? Because I like to understand the context and I like to understand the full picture and kind of how this puzzle piece fits in the big picture. And I think the cool thing about this is that it gets them to buy into, who you are and why it's important. And then obviously, again, going through all of the steps very clearly, and it will feel a little bit weird because it is so micro, but again, it goes back to, really preparing them for success and not just setting them loose. And I am by no means a perfectionist or a micromanager, but I do think that when you're able to give them steps like this and be very specific, just that consistency that it brings to what you're offering. And I think that there's a little bit of flexibility if you have a VA that, maybe I think being open to the fact that there might be a better way to do it is obviously really important. But I think starting off with these like very standard ways to do it will make things very smoothly and it will communicate expectations really well. So creating those, the videos, doing anything you can to give them the resources if they're going to work in like a specific software that whether that's maybe it's Proline, maybe it's AccuLinks, giving them resources. Proline does a great job with a lot of video resources. So using as many resources as possible, as long as it's a consistent message, gives them tools. And I think the cool thing about giving them the additional tools and the additional resources is just going to give them a better picture of the software that you're using or the platforms. And that, kind of opens that dialogue to, hey, there might be a better way to do this. I really love this quote by Sam Altman. It's easier for a team to do a hard thing that really matters than to do an easy thing that doesn't matter. And I think that speaks to, having that why in your SOP, and just really getting as much buy-in as possible. I know that sometimes it doesn't, our VA, as much as, we love her and she's amazing, she's far away. And so I think a lot of times it can feel a little bit like, we're very far from each other. But I think having that common like mission and purpose has been a really good thing. And I think we'll just continue to, create an environment where there's a lot of buy-in. So the next is where to start looking. I didn't have a lot of resources. We can get some more. I wanted to talk for a minute about kind of the pros and the cons of using an agency. So Virtual Lasting is actually who we use. And one of the benefits, I would say, just kind of going through a few pros of international, obviously, or using an agency, I'm sorry. One, in the case of Virtual Lasting, I don't know if I spelled that right, they have a free trial. So essentially, the process is very streamlined and finding ones that match, with exactly what you're looking for with the skill set. And then you have a 1 week free trial with 2 VAs. And so you're able to really, it's not just like, let's get through the interview process and see who makes the cut, but you're really able to see them in action, doing the things that you want them to. I think that another pro with using an agency is you have kind of another layer of communication between um, yourself and the VA. Obviously, not always, but I do think having that kind of, if you're possibly having an issue with them, I think having a little bit of a buffer and somebody to talk to and kind of, troubleshooting together. I think we have seen the benefits of that with our relationship with virtual lasting. Another thing with using an agency is you are really able um, to know kind of like the standards that they keep, kind of the training that they do, and I think that's really helpful. Obviously, a con of an agency is it's going to be more expensive because there's a middleman, and so the pricing for using someone from an agency is always going to be more expensive than finding them on your own. I think that in the roofing space, there are probably, opportunities to, network and find a roofer that might, have somebody that they're using part of the time and you could use them the other part. So I think there's some opportunity there to go straight to the source, but I do think being very, careful about their skill set and making sure that it matches the need. Obviously, when we're interviewing, we're all on our best behavior. And so again, kind of goes back to that, that 1 week trial, really getting into like, who is this person? How, are they a good fit? Whether that is, the culture fit or, the best fit for the role that you're looking to fill. And so I think one last kind of pro for an agency, for example, when Brad and I first started, we had we had a trial and it was not the best fit. We were able to then pretty quickly get 2 more in. And so I think operating anytime we're hiring, if we can operate with that abundance mindset that like, hey, this person may not be the best fit. We hope that he or she is. But if he or she is not, we know that there is going to be a better fit for us and they're going to find a better fit somewhere else too. And I think that having that ability to pretty quickly transition, knowing that not only would the person that wasn't a good fit for us find a better fit because they would place her somewhere, but also they would be able to get us somebody pretty quickly too. I think that was really beneficial because it is probably my nature to hold on to somebody a little bit longer than should. And then it just, becomes more stressful and frustrating. So I do think those are a few more pros for using an agency. And if you are looking for a VA, and you can always reach out to Brad and I too, and we can kind of walk you through a little bit. So the last step for a good relationship, obviously, is being really intentional about evaluating, creating a job scorecard. We have a resource for that is tedious and we've not used it, but it is a good kind of baseline of even if it's not something that you look at all the time, but creating like things that are, really mapped out, like this is what we need done, and kind of evaluating, what is this looking like? I think the reality for a lot of roles is there's going to be an evolution. You might have something in your mind when they start and realize, there are other areas that, are going to benefit you more. But I think creating at least some kind of, KPIs and scoreboards, and typically this person is not going to be, a salesperson. So the KPI will look different than, something that you might usually use for KPIs, but just making sure that, the objectives are being met and that the time that you've given them is appropriate too. I think with time blindness, sometimes I think, oh, this task will take 15 minutes and it really takes 45, or maybe it's even vice versa. So I think being really intentional about, keeping track of, is the time they're spending making sense, and do we need to make adjustments? I think in the beginning, frequent communication is really, really important, making sure that, they understand the things that you're asking them to do, and that it is trying to get that ramp up time and that kind of learning curve as short as possible, so that, you are able to pass on those tasks and get them off your plate. I think scheduling evaluations preemptively and kind of, having those on your calendar is important, because it's very easy for those to, not to be a priority. And so then when you do need to schedule them, it almost feels like a consequence versus, just something that you do to check in to make sure that everybody stays on the same page. One thing that we do that I really like that Brad has basically a template that our VA NIBE uses every day. And it basically is, what did you get done today? What are you working on? What do you need my help with? What are you thankful for? And it's something that, again, keeps us on the same page. I don't always look at that, but it definitely helps us, it takes away any doubt. I think one of the worst feelings, again, one of the best feelings, is paying someone that is making your life easier. One of the worst is paying someone that you're not sure what they did today. And so having those daily check-ins, make sure that, we are aware, and we're able to see very visually, like, oh, holy moly, like she got a lot done today. Or she didn't, maybe we didn't give her enough to do. And so we need to, think of a few more things to add to her plate. And so I think, having those daily check-ins has been really good. Kind of going back to, I didn't really have a section for this, but when you're hiring, one of the things that, as you were thinking about who is the best fit for this role, there are going to be some things that, somebody that is not US based is going, to be amazing at. And there are going to be sometimes where, whether it's making sure that you have someone that is either a native English speaker, or that, if they're English is their second language or third, or making sure that, they are communicating really well. And so in the process of hiring, making sure that you have things in place that you're able to test that in a natural environment. One thing that Brad always did when we were, hiring VAs was having them write a funny story to test their English. And it was there were some funny stories, and some stories that were not so funny, some that were kind of offensive, but it was a really good way for us, to get an idea what that looks like. They're, the way that they're writing, because if we're asking them to do something, we want to make sure, obviously, that it is a good reflection of our business, and, making sure that their skill set matches the tasks that, I love the offensive ones. I mean, the offensive ones were pretty funny. I was kind of like, hire this person, but also don't let them speak to anyone but us, and they're just going to entertain us the whole time. And one wrote something about farting, I think, which I think was a great way to get to Brad's heart really quickly. So it was an interesting kind of conglomeration. So I'm going to go over this.
So
We did not. No.
It obviously wasn't that good.
No, it was not. But it made us laugh. So I'm going to put, we'll have resources with the replay, but this is the automations worksheet that I'm going to post in there too. It's a little bit, it's not all the same thing, but I do think, again, when you are thinking about, even if you just read through the automations worksheet, and keep these things in mind when you're thinking about a VA, because the reality is, like, there are going to be some things that we might initially think, oh yeah, this could be a good VA task, but it's something that you can actually, use with the tools that you're already paying for. So I think just thinking about that in the context of what do I need for a VA will be a good start to kind of brainstorm those together. So I think one other resource, so we'll send the resources. We'll post those. One thing that I think has been really helpful for us is creating stop sharing because I didn't pull it up, but creating kind of a central document that has basically a Google Doc that has all of those tasks, and then linking from those tasks to the SOPs. You can keep them in a really centralized location, trying to make even the way that you're describing the tasks really standardized so that when you go back to it, you're not like, what was I talking about? But trying to, divide those up so that as you continue to grow, it may be something that right now you need one VA to manage all of these 20 tasks because the amount of business that you're doing. But if you can kind of break those down into kind of categories, whether that's, social media management, whether that's, ordering, whether, staffing, all of these things, if you're able to kind of break those down into chunks, even if it's one person managing it now, as you continue to grow, you can, you'll be able to divide those up easier. And I think one thing to keep in mind, and I wish I had a copy of this slide. So Brad and I were in St. Louis a few weeks ago for an event, and there was one of the speakers was the owner of Sphere Rocket, which is the VA agency. And it was really fun to hear the story and to kind of see they've, grown this pretty amazing company that serves a lot of businesses. And the thing that I really thought was very cool was he put up kind of like an executive assistant and, the typical salary in the United States. And then, I'm a big believer in hiring in the United States for sure. But I do think there is opportunity for, outsourcing things and getting specialists. So what he did is he had the executive assistant, and then he had maybe like 6 tasks that they would regularly do. And essentially you could get a full-time VA for each of those tasks, for a similar price. There are absolutely pros and cons about using international VAs, but I do think there's a lot of opportunity there on the things that can be, really automated and standardized. So I think that is. Does anyone have any questions about the process or anything that they want to share, even about your own experience, or talk through kind of where, if you've been thinking about hiring a VA, where you're at in the process, or any positive or negative experiences with the process too?
I've been thinking about hiring a VA for a separate purpose. I'm not sure if you guys think it's a great idea or not, but what if you had your VA scanning social media, like Facebook community groups and Nextdoor accounts and stuff like that, and looking for when leads pop on there? So when people post. Now, I'm not saying, because I know that there's companies in my area that have VAs acting as previous customers, because that's totally shady. I don't like that. But if you had a VA just look for the post and then tag the business in it, or post that they're an employee for the business, which they are. But that way you get the visibility on all those posts.
Oh, wait. Yeah. I mean, I think that as long as you're following the guidelines of the groups, I think that there's probably a lot of opportunity there. And
yeah, I think so. To jump in, kind of, first of all, Elizabeth, that was awesome. Thank you. There's not really a wrong thing to hire a VA for, as long as you have the right VA and as long as you have the right person. So you could hire a VA to answer the phones, and one VA would make your company look silly, and one VA would probably be one of the best moves you've made in the recent, like in your business. Like, it really just depends. For instance, we mentioned I've had one VA that was with me for years, and he's great, and he could interact with our clients, but he was not someone that I could have get on the phone with clients or really get on video chats, because his English is pretty good typed, not as good on video. We had other VAs who just weren't, like, who are just underwhelming. Like, we had VAs who came in and were, maybe we thought that they were going to be one thing, then once they were on the inside, they pretty quickly showed that they weren't grasping the concepts. We created the SOPs and they weren't really reading them carefully, and they just like had trouble doing the basics. And then we've had other VAs that like represented us poorly. We have one guy who, bless his heart, but he was me on Facebook, and we had ads going to a Facebook group. And then when people joined the Facebook group, they said, yes, they want to schedule a meeting. And he was in charge of being on my profile and scheduling it. And he made me look psycho. Like he made it like the wording he used, he made me just look weird. And that was not a
Sometimes,
good situation. It's funny. Beth had she has like 30 sisters, and they had a group chat just loving it, how worked up I would get. But the point is, there's not really a wrong thing to hire the VAs for. The presentation that we saw a couple weeks ago talked about that, how a lot of the time it's our own limiting beliefs that says a VA wouldn't be good for a role, not the capability of the people that are in the hiring pool. So lead gen, admin, there's so many different things. In fact, anything that doesn't require someone being out in the field is something that could potentially be trained up with a VA. I would probably have your last line of defense would be getting VAs to answer calls for you and like interact with clients. I don't think that's the first place I would look from a on the phone perspective. On the computer's fine. But even there, John DeLure, who you guys know, one of the partners in Proline, owns a roofing company. He has VAs that answer the phone, and you would never know that they are not sitting next to him in his office. But they're not in the United States. I don't know where they are. See? But I know they're in the outside of the country. But there's so many options, and I think last week we talked about how tough the overhead can be and how rough the cash flow can be running a roofing business, especially if we're dealing with a lot of insurance. A VA is a really good opportunity to hire someone to take some core tasks off your plate without having to add a ton to your overhead. And I think that it could be utilized a lot more than it is in the roofing industry. But a lot of the time, us in the roofing industry are waiting for a roofing specific solution. And there's so few. I mean, there's a couple companies that offer VA services for roofing contractors, but you guys probably will be more disappointed with them than someone that you just put in some of the front end work to create some trainings for. And like, if you are a paying client, like we'll help you with any of that as well, right? So you don't have to take it all on. You don't have to worry, what if I mess up? Like, we'll hold your hand as much as you need us to, because this stuff matters. And the more I can get you guys out of the weeds, the more you can focus on the real needle movers. Sorry for the tangent, Elizabeth, but I
no, it's
want to
good.
kind of piggyback off of her presentation and make sure that you guys know there's not really a wrong thing to hire a VA for, as long as it's not in the field.
I mean, the founder of Sphere Rocket literally said he had his VA on Tinder or one of those, and that's how he found his wife. So he definitely took the outsourcing. Worked out really well for him, though. He was doing his income generating activities, and she was helping find him a wife. So, but I do think, yeah, I think that it is important to like emphasize it is often our limiting beliefs that keeps us from like getting rid of stuff that, we really don't need to be doing and really do like lower our quality of life. And it's just important to remember that. Most things can be solved by an SOP, a good SOP.
Yeah. And if you think it can't, think twice, because it might be a revolutionary thought. Like if you think, oh, well, no, there's no way I can outsource. There's no way I could delegate that. Let's not say outsource. There's no way I could delegate that. Like if you think hard about it, you might be able to operationalize something that you previously thought was unoperationalizable. And that could be a huge door for you to move to the next step. Any questions? We have a lot of lively, engaged, smiling faces. There we go. Thank you.
Zach wins.
No, I don't think I haven't. So when you guys make your SOPs, do you guys kind of like, like in school when you had to write that whole story on how to like make a peanut butter and jelly? Is that how you guys kind of like look at it, like every single step? So
Borderline sarcastic.
That's kind of like overwhelming, I guess. So how do you guys really narrow it down to which one you're gonna make first?
Schedule a call with us. It's really like I mean, a time audit would probably be a really helpful thing to do. And then like Elizabeth and I are going to do an exercise. I think you actually, Zach, mentioned this book, right? 10x is greater than 2x.
Not me.
Wait, what was your first book you read?
You like The Way of the
Oh,
Wolf.
that's the 10x rule.
Oh,
that was the 10x rule. Yeah.
Either way, I've never read that one, but similar concept, I'd imagine. But 10x is greater than 2x is what I am reading, and then very quickly was like, Elizabeth, you should read this too. I think this would be helpful for us. And one of the concepts that it really harps on is like the 80-20 rule, where 80% of your results are coming from 20% of your effort. But that leaves an additional 80% that is effort that you're making that's not necessarily getting you huge results. So what Elizabeth and I are going to do is we're going to make a huge list of all the things we do, because we need to hire another VA. We also need to use the one we have better, because she, like, at least 25% of the time is like, hey, is there anything I can do? Because she finishes her tasks at inhuman speeds. Which is amazing. Like, and she doesn't mess things up. She really is awesome. But what we're gonna do is, okay, so what are, like, make a list. We might come up with like 10, 15, 20 things each. And then we're gonna prescribe, okay, 100 divided by 20 would be 5. And so that's 5%. And we're gonna look, okay, what's 20%? What are the things that are 20%? So we have this list of 20 things that we do. Each one is worth 5%. If we could only keep 4 of them, what would those things be? If there were only 4 that we could keep, but the business had to keep functioning, what would those things be? And then we're gonna look at those carefully. Elizabeth has more than me. I probably have like 5 things I do. But we're going to look, okay, how can we outsource this? Elizabeth is a yes person, which is an amazing quality, but she also will take on, I mean, I currently do not understand how she does all the things that she does. But she still is like, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. So in order to make room for future yeses, we probably are going to need to find, okay, what has she said yes to in the past that we need to organize and delegate? And she's done a great job at it but a lot of the SOPs we've made were 3 months ago or 4 months ago. And so in that 3 to 4 months, we've grown and we've brought on more clients and we've kind of solidified a few more ways that we do things. And because we've had some solidification there, man, I'm using all kinds of funny words. Because of that, there's room for us to organize and delegate additional things. And our goal is to make sure that when we delegate things, it improves you guys' experience. And that's hugely important. And that's something that both her and I are like protective of. So if we're going to delegate something, we're only going to do it in a way that is like, frankly, we don't want you to even notice. Like, and if you do notice, it's just updates, things like that. So just really important to like look at how are you spending your time. I always like to organize what's one-time work and what's recurring work. You as the owner should mostly focus on one-time work and then your zone of genius. One-time work is infrastructure, zone of genius is nobody can promote the company like I can. No one can sell. What are the things that you actually enjoy? And then the recurring work should be your team. Because there's people out there that love recurring work, like a lot, way more than you would expect. If you're the type of person that hates it, you probably are blind to the fact that there's people out there that really do love it. And there's also degrees of willingness to do it as well. So like you might have a number 2 or a number 3 that has a larger threshold for one-time work, and they can see it to third base, systematize it, and then have a VA take it home and be the one that's doing that on a normal basis. Or other employees, because these SOPs that Elizabeth is showing, there's nothing that says they're only for VAs. That's just the use case we're talking about here. Infrastructure is the way that your business is going to give you the happy feelings, though, because that's what is going to make sure that like you wake up every morning and you have a pretty good idea of the way your business is going to operate.
Brad, I have a quick question. Where are y'all going to be posting those SOPs at? Because I think it's Adriana. Hi. I just got introduced to you guys today through Facebook. So where can I get all of these things? Because I'm going to be the one that's making all the SOPs and things for disaster-proof roofing. So
I think we need to add you to Skool.
Okay.
So you could drop your email in the group chat.
Okay.
That'll be where it's classroom section. It's really easy to navigate once you're on the inside, but it'll be in the classroom section, and then it'll say Wednesday live training recordings, and you'll go there. And if you have any questions at all, once you're in there, you just let us know and we'll walk you through it pretty quickly.
Okay. Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, I'm super stoked about all of this. So thanks.
Thank you. And great to meet you. Do we have any more questions? Anything else? Kofi says good stuff. Elizabeth, I will echo him. That was awesome. Thank you for putting the work that you do into these slides. I usually just am like, hey, I put this together the last 10 minutes. It helps a lot kind of keep it structured and organized. So thank you guys and Adriana and Elizabeth, but you know I'm not actually talking to you. So guys and gal, if you guys have any questions at all, if you guys are wondering whether it might make sense for you to hire a VA, just let us know. We are happy to walk you through it, happy to guide you through it. Admin is something that I do want each one of you guys to not be doing on a normal basis. So the sooner that we can have that offloaded, the better, as long as you are generating revenue. So if you are not generating revenue yet, or if you're kind of just getting started, let's get a little bit of a nest egg and let's try to have like 6 months of pay in savings. The nice thing though is VAs are like They can be as little as 500 a month, as much as like 1,200, 1,300. So 6 months of savings isn't too big of a feat. But it just will help you make sure you're not stressed about the decision to bring them on, so that you can actually give them your attention, and it's not in the wrong places. But just reach out. Any questions, let us know. And if you want that and would like us to kind of work with you on it, we can make some introductions. We can help with some of the trainings. We can walk them through some of the things that we know you need to do. And we can walk you through how to create some of these. Just don't hesitate to get support, because that's what makes us happy. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Elizabeth, and we'll talk soon.